Okay, so I'm joined here today by Chris Toit, who's going to talk about part one of this series that we're running in the Umhlanga Arch media channel. And this is probably for me the most important part because I think over the past couple of weeks and certainly during the lockdown period, it's been a huge battle, a mental battle for a lot of people. And you know, as you would have heard in the intro to this video and this series, is there are a lot of voices out there, and it's very hard to cut away from the noise and focus in on something that's meaningful and practical, and that allows us to get something that we can take away, something of substance that we can apply to our circumstance in our lives, and hopefully some of the stuff that Chris will talk about today will lend a little bit of clarity to whatever you are experiencing currently. And just a bit of background on Chris. I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail, but he's a mentor of mine personally. It's been such a privilege for an emerging entrepreneur, I would call myself, to have the experience of interacting and engaging with a guy like Chris, who's a business leader in our country. He's built some amazing businesses, some amazing teams, but not only that, he's had a strong voice into the community as well. And he's part of some really inspiring and uplifting projects around Durban specifically. So it's great to have Chris with us today to chat. And the one thing that we wanted to do is talk about leading in a time of uncertainty. Chris is going to touch on a few things around hope, maybe collaboration, lend a bit of support, and talk about innovation and take some examples of what we're doing in the Umhlanga Arch development that might help you better understand the concepts that he might talk about, or his thoughts and feelings. So Chris, thank you very much. Maybe you can just kick off and just give us a little bit of insight as to what leadership might mean to you, certainly in this time. What have you found in the discussions that you've been having with people around you? And we can move forward from there.
Thanks, Mark. I think the reality is that people require leadership, and they require vision. And I think so often in an office environment, when you're having constant contact with people, you might forget that. But what they're doing is they're actually watching your every move. They're watching your words. They're watching your actions. What's been interesting about this time is that from a leadership perspective, you now have to lead from the isolation of your own home office or whatever you've set up remotely. And it's been interesting for me because actually the true leaders now have to step to the fore. Because what I've found is people are incredibly vulnerable right now. And, you know, if you're vulnerable and you're in a context of an office place where there's laughter and there's banter, your vulnerability might not be as prevalent. But when you're at home on your own and you're feeling vulnerable, what I've found is isolation is actually fueling people's vulnerability, because they don't know whether they're getting paid, they don't know whether they're getting half pay, they don't know whether they're getting retrenched, they don't know what the end of the month brings. And we all know, we've all experienced financial difficulty. Financial difficulty affects your sleep, it affects your eating, it affects your relationships, it affects your marriage, it affects everything. It affects your health. And I think that we as leaders have to be very cognizant of the fact that one, people are feeling vulnerable, and two, they're needing real clarity in terms of vision and leadership. What I've found just practically is, as we've had calls and engagement with my own staff, is that I found I'm asking my staff questions that I would invariably never have asked them in an office environment, because I'm realizing that we need to try and engage people personally and emotionally and psychologically, to encourage them and to get them out of a state of feeling vulnerable. And so just simple questions of, you know, how's your day? How have you been managing yourself? What have you been eating? What have you been getting up to? Have you been exercising? These are all questions that invariably we wouldn't ask our staff members. And what happens is I've seen that people begin to relax a little bit and actually start to engage a lot more. You know, It's interesting. I heard this quote the other day, which I really, really enjoyed, which said that people see your life to hear your words. And I think at this time, leaders need to be living what their words are uttering, because words are one thing, but what gives words real power is when people can see the testimony of those words actually being outworked. And one of them is peace. So as a leader, if we are not infusing peace to our people and those around us, they're not going to be peaceful. And likewise with hope, if our words are one of negativity and criticism and hopelessness, well, then we're going to be giving off a persona of just that. And so I think language is important at this time. We've got to be very guarded as leaders about our language, which is difficult because, like all leaders, we are exposed to so much information, and most of it is negative. So how do you take that and filter it into positive without losing the authenticity and the realness of the situation that we find ourselves in? So it's a very interesting time that we live in, but I think I'm positive. I generally am a positive guy, but what I'm seeing is an incredible opportunity to actually put a good front foot forward and establish some parameters going into the future.
I think that's awesome. I think they see your life to hear your words is such. I mean, that's an amazing way to look at the situation, and introspectively for a lot of leaders actually to look at themselves, right, and to say,
Correct.
The time of chaos and when you're in an office environment and you're busy and you've got excuses to pull yourself out of certain situations. Here we're all exposed, right? We're all vulnerable.
Yeah.
And for me, a lot of vulnerability actually inspires growth. In people, you've got to be willing to be vulnerable and to accept your vulnerability in front of certain people you might not have before. So similarly, like you asking your staff certain questions, I'm sure they're asking you the same like hard-hitting questions they might not have asked you that you're having to elaborate on. And I think that's just a really good little takeaway that just to remind ourselves constantly that people see your life to hear your words, and this period is.
Mark, you get into many of these calls. And a lot of people have the theory. But what people actually need at this time, I always relate it to maths and applied maths. So you get maths, which is the theory of math, and then you get the actual application. And I think in the business world, it's the same. You get concepts and you get people. And at this time, it's not about concepts, it's about people. And I think we have to put that at the forefront of our leadership at this time, because everybody knows the theory, but what they're actually looking for now is somebody who can take that theory and they can apply it into their current situation. And when the chips are down, is really those people that can take the theory and apply it are actually the ones that are going to come out on top.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That the practical application of that theory now is more important than ever, and actually not to have excuses about the fact that you're locked down. There's a lot of things that you can adapt to, and in the environment that you're in, we've got time now, and so I think we've got to use this time wisely. And the application of theory is certainly something that people should be practicing, and whatsoever relevant to you in your circumstance, right? And maybe if you can't apply it right now, and there's a genuine reason why you can't, it's being prepared for when the season ends. It's about using your time really wisely.
Let me give you an example. So we're in the lending space, and we lend predominantly to the SMME market. And obviously people are under pressure. Restaurateurs are not trading, and so cash flow liquidity is under pressure. So what we've realized is actually people are responding uncharacteristically. So it's not the normal, they're not responding out of their normal character. And my brother and I, who's my business partner, we've realized that actually the way we need to engage people, I mean, you always get those guys who are ducking and diving and don't want to pay. But the genuine guy who's genuinely in a pickle because his business is under stress, we've decided to rather deal with those guys graciously, because what that is, that's a value that you carry, and you have the theory. So how do you outwork that? Well, you outwork it by the way you respond to someone who's genuinely saying, listen, I just can't pay because my business is under pressure. And it's a different response to one where it's just business as normal.
Yeah.
So that's a typical example, I think, of something that we can practically, we all know the theory of the Ubuntu spirit of South Africans, but now we can take that and actually apply it.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's a good way that we can now lead maybe into a little bit of how collaboration is going to really pull us through this time, right? It's about leveraging off relationships, networks, skill sets, value systems like you touched on. So important. You know, values, often you walk into a business and the values are stuck up on the wall. We're going to be tested now as businesses and as individuals as well. So maybe we can talk a little bit about collaboration and how that might lead to innovation in this time, and maybe draw some parallels to what we're doing at Umhlanga Arch if you can.
So, you know, one of the things that I realized very early in my business life is one of the enemies or the challenges that an entrepreneur faces is loneliness. And I've had the incredible privilege of being in partnership with my brother for 20 years. So I've always had a partner. But as I've engaged with SMME, small business owners, I've realized one of the things that they fight every day is loneliness. You know, no one actually cares, and no one really understands what it's like when it comes to the end of the month. You're a business owner and you've been entrusted with 10, 40, 100 people, and you don't have money to pay their salaries. That is an incredible burden. It's an incredible load to carry. There is privilege, but that is one of the areas that I find that business leaders really have to come to terms with. And so having said that, this is almost a similar situation, because even though we might be in partnership or in a team environment, we're actually isolated. So we're all sitting in our own homes in isolation. And I've found that a lot of the conversations, it's so interesting as I'm engaging with business leaders who invariably will be talking about return on investment, revenue, expenses, efficiencies. Those are not the topics that our guys are talking about. The topics they're talking about are trusted relationships, teamwork, authenticity, being authentic with those around you, relationships, and I mean, we were on a call the other night with several business leaders, and at the end of it, when I took inventory of the call, I thought, we actually didn't talk about the normal things that business leaders talk about. We actually started getting to the root of business, which is values, which is what we believe in. And what we, you know, the theory of what we've always wanted, we're now talking about. And one of the big takeaways that I believe, and I'm trusting we can take away from this, is that it's not just business as usual after this. That actually some of these concepts that we've been talking about, you know, people before profit, it's great in theory, but get into the marketplace and that just reverses. It all becomes about profit. If we can take some of these concepts and some of these conversations and actually implement them and drive them into the future, I think, one, it's going to make our businesses far, far more, not only more profitable, but we'll have a lot more fun. You know, I think that often we lose the fun element of business because we're so driven by trying to achieve the bottom line. And I think what this period has done is actually focused us back into some of the values and the principles that we should be applying.
Sure, that is so good. I don't even want to add anything to that. That is an unbelievable statement, and maybe hopefully we can take that clip and just share that around to people, just to remind them of what's going to be important. And I think just if you're talking like that, Chris, that's also really critical if we want to apply that to our own circumstance. You know, really the good thing in a way about this pandemic is that everybody's in it together. It's not a divided war, it's a united war. And you know, we all facing the same foe and the same enemy. We've all got varying degrees of stress, etc. But the guys that are going to come out this on the other side are those guys and girls that are practicing in businesses, that are practicing their values, and not only sticking them on a wall in theory, but practicing them in reality, that are collaborating with one another, leveraging skill sets, you know, acting with grace in circumstances, giving each other the respect that we deserve, and working through it together. If we try and work through this once we're out of this in isolation, it's not going to work. I think that we're going to be back to that old principle of being driven for the wrong reasons, and I think that the new world order is going to be fundamentally different. A lot of the top businessmen and women in the world are actually articulating that very same narrative. I'm reading, you know, the economy and the way that we interact and the way that we measure success and the way that we measure profit in businesses is going to fundamentally change. It might not be economic anymore moving forward, you know. And hopefully we can stay really present in the moment when we leave it and remember these kind of lessons. And it'll be great to do a further series follow on to this in terms of like lockdown lessons and just be really focused on one or two of these things, like value, such an important point, not only in our personal lives, but in our businesses that we can expand upon. So I think that's great, Chris. And I mean, what did you do then on
a little bit on collaboration?
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that's really come out of this time is, you know, we are bombarded with so many voices. I mean, every morning you wake up and you've got emails and you've got people with perspective. And I think one of the things that I've taken away from this time is that one, I have to silence certain voices and I have to elevate other voices. And the voices that I'm elevating and I'm taking note of are the voices that I trust, number one, that I believe have my best interests at heart, number two, and they are trusted voices that have delivered in the past. And I think what people are finding is that they're realizing that actually relationships underpinned by trust are the true voices that they're adhering to. Doesn't mean that we don't read extensively and we listen to other people. I just think what people are finding is that in their current situation, they've got to be able to pull on and make decisions based on certain trust levels and certain trusted voices in their lives.
Yeah, that's an awesome point and a great takeaway for people out there to really take note of and apply to their circumstance. Really good. Chris, how are you seeing moving forward now? Maybe just the last thing that we can touch on, because there's so much good content here, but we don't want to make this series too long. But innovation is going to be so important. You know, understanding that the way that things have always been done is not the way that necessarily that things are going to be done moving forward, and that goes two ways. You know, that goes from products and the way that products come to the market, but also what the market's going to want to see and what they're going to want to need and how they're going to interact with each other. You know, it's going to take a lot of adjusting. You know, a lot of things are becoming the new norm. I've got 3 young kids who just seem to be taking this time in their stride, you know, and this just becomes a part of that emerging generation sort of lifestyle and something that they've got to look out for. It becomes natural. But how do you see innovation impacting, certainly like maybe like a development in Umhlanga Arch as an example?
Well, I think firstly we're going to have to be real about the circumstances we find ourselves in. There's certain businesses that are going to sink in the storm. It's just quite simple. There are other businesses that are going to have to really relook at the way they do business and how they do business. A typical example, or a couple examples that I can maybe think of off the top of my head is the restaurant business. I think the restaurant business is going to have to reinvent itself. If, for example, we go back to business and we're not allowed to have more than, well, firstly, I'm not sure people are going to want to be in an environment where there are a lot of people. I think people are going to come out of this very health conscious and very conscious about who they interact with and how they interact. The gym business, you know, whether you're going to want to go and do gym with 20 guys sweating, high-fiving each other, I don't know whether people are going to be keen to do that, you know. So those types of businesses are really going to have to reinvent themselves. But here's what I see. I think that the whole internet shopping is going to explode. I think that buying online is going to be the new norm, because what's happened is, in a way, people have been forced to engage that type of spending now, and now it's not going to be intimidating. And so I think you're actually going to see a massive upsurge in online products and online shopping. How does that leave the retail market? Very vulnerable, I think. Again, they're going to have to reinvent themselves, whether they become purely destination stroke showroom stores, which then people would go online and shop. Landlords are going to have to, and I mean, we're a landlord, we're in the property development game. We got to ask ourselves, the way we charge rental, is that going to change? Is that going to fundamentally change? I think it could. And I think those that are prepared to innovate and be innovative in their thinking are going to be able to stand, the long course here, because the big shopping centers, the big landlords, big property funds are going to be under pressure. And so I think you're going to see a massive change in the whole property sector.
Yeah, I think that health conscious, just that point that you talked on is so poignant to this conversation. A lot of the ones that I've been having in parallel are bringing up the same thing. It's no longer just about your personal security, it's about your health security. Looking after one's health is going to be so important. So everything you mentioned is so good. It's that kind of, people are going to be moving away from these mass gatherings and where you've got 20,000 people in a certain center or a space. That might change. Guys are going to be looking more for that destination, that experience. You spoke earlier in the conversation about authenticity and relationships and trust, and they're going to be looking for that more owner-operated lifestyle environment where they can go and interact and engage with, get their social fix, as it were. But certainly about to reinvent.
I think that we intrinsically designed to be hands-on with each other and to be affectionate. And I think of your dad. Every time I see him, he kisses me. And now, do I not want that to happen? Of course I want that. I want that affection because I think we designed like that.
Yeah.
So how do you adapt? Because ultimately, we've had this conversation, Mark, and your dad's so good at it. What's your market? What are they wanting? What are they desiring? And the market does desire human contact.
Yeah.
But how are we going to give them human contact, taking into account what we've just been through?
Yeah.
So it's going to be very interesting to see those businesses that are prepared to look, to see what their market's really wanting, and then to adapt, and then obviously to adjust their product offering.
Yeah, that's such an amazing takeaway. I think, Chris, like your insight has been awesome. So many guys are going to want to take this and re-watch it and try and apply some of these messages that you've given today and some of the really important points raised, which we'll summarize during the course of the video. But for me, one of the biggest things that's come out of this discussion, I've got a lot of respect for you as a person, and your voice is one that I elevate. And I think it's just some advice we can give to everybody, young, old, it doesn't matter. There's so many voices out there. There's so many channels. This is a channel that we're putting content out onto the web. And it might be for you, again, like I said earlier, and it might not be for you, but elevate those voices that are meaningful to you, that are going to add value and contribute to what you're trying to do in your circumstance. Probably the biggest takeaway that we can all take out of isolation is that we've got to learn to silence certain voices and elevate others. And I think that's just incredible insight and leadership from you. It's certainly going to become something that I'm going to use outside of this platform. So thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Mark.